The best part about this chapter is Maomao smiling to herself while remembering Jinshi dressed as a celestial maiden. The scene starts with Maomao closing her apothecary shop just as the lanterns at the verdigris house are being lit. She's a practical young lady. She knows there's no point in wasting oil if there are no customers. She collects her herbs, hands the coins she earned to the madam for safekeeping, and tells Xiaoyu it's time to go home. Fun fact, in the novel, Maomao actually picks him up by the scruff of his neck like a kitten. The Kurata manga version didn't draw it that way, but I'm hoping the other manga version or the anime eventually shows it. Back at their shack, things aren't exactly luxurious, so when Maomao serves dinner and Choyu complains about the lack of meat, she bluntly tells him to earn the money for it himself. Even though she gets enough money to raise him, she wants to teach him a lesson. Those who don't work, don't eat. He asks her, since you have money, why can't we have some decent food? While reaching for another piece of bread, despite his complaining. She explains that they are renting the shop from the old granny and he has no idea how much she actually charges. He points out that they could just move somewhere else, but it's not that simple. As the cold air seeps through the cracks of the closed window, he mentions that the verdigris house is so much warmer than their drafty little home. Looking at him shivering, she says they will go out tomorrow to get some new clothes. For some reason, their interaction always gives off sibling vibes to me.
Brown sugar.
Excited about the shopping, he tosses his hands up, but the motion throws him off his chair. Because of his paralysis, he's unable to catch himself, so he just tumbles to the ground. Like any older sister, Maomao simply looks at him while she continues to wash her bowl. The next day, they head out for clothes. Maomao moves toward the center to find a proper storefront, and soon they end up in a used clothing shop. Xiaoyu calls them hand-me-downs, but she tells him not to be so picky. While they look, he finds a white robe. It is plain and unusual, except for the embroidery on the sleeves that look like vines. He straight up calls it ugly because, to him, girls' clothes should be colorful. She tries to shut him up, but instead, she hears the shopkeeper laugh. He comes over and explains that this specific dress was once worn by a celestial maiden, which immediately piques his interest, so the shopkeeper begins to tell the whole story. And Maomao has to listen. Whether she likes it or not, it's a small shop after all. Also, while I was going through this scene, I noticed that in the novel, she actually slaps him to shut him up. Anyways, the story was that a villager once saved a young maiden who had lost her way. She was breathtaking with fair skin and golden hair. From the very first glance, he was bound to her. To repay his kindness, she gifted him a robe she had woven herself, a garment adorned with strange patterns that fetched a price far beyond ordinary silks. Yet before long, the maiden wept, yearning for her distant home, though she knew nothing of her origins or the path that had brought her there. All the while, the villager asked for her hand again and again until at last she accepted. However, it was poor timing because just then her family arrived at the village searching for her. But the villager had gained her acceptance, so now he would not give her up, and so he hid her away while the entire village feigned ignorance. Her family left the village, but their suspicions remained, so he made up his mind at once to marry the young maiden. She tried to refuse, yet he would not listen. She was made to bathe at the village spring to purify herself. In her desperation, the young woman asked the villager for one last favor, to allow her to wear the gown she made, which would be a reminder of her lost home. Even in her wedding dress, she kept crying, her tears soaking the dress. Once more she pleaded to be reunited with her family. If that can't be done, then, the maiden whispered, drenching herself in oil, and then she set herself on fire, ran toward the spring, and drowned. But in the spring, not a trace of the maiden remained, just the wedding dress she had worn. Some said maybe she had returned to the heavens where she belonged. The shopkeeper claims that this was the robe the nymph was wearing. Maomao obviously didn't believe a word he said, but Xiaoyu bought the story, asking her to buy the robe. She knew by looking at the abacus he was holding that the price he was about to suggest was about one digit too many. She nearly laughed out loud, thinking to herself that she sees a slightly damaged nymph come to the verdigris house on a regular basis. The shopkeeper says that some people have no sense of romance, spreading his arms and shaking his head with an expression of disappointment, while Maomao thinks she should be the one disappointed, because not only had she seen a celestial nymph before, she'd seen one vanish into the water just like in the story, and it had come out of the water too, looking like a drenched mouse and asking if she ever planned a repeat performance. But then again, such sights must be rare indeed. Without meaning to, she chuckled at the memory. I read this part so many times, and every single time I chuckle with her. Anyways, the world was full of strange things, but they always had some explanation. It was only because people didn't know why certain things happened that they made up stories about curses, magical powers, and sometimes even ghosts. She took a good hard look at the robe and finally found the texture of the fabric and studied the embroidery. She grinned and asked the shopkeeper if she could sell it for 10 times the price he was asking. Of course, he agreed, saying that if she did, he'd give her everything she was holding for free. He sounded like he was joking, and even Chow Yu had his doubts. Then she picked up a coal with chopsticks and borrowed the rope, casually throwing it on the ground and putting the coal on top of it. The shopkeeper nearly lost his mind, but then he saw that it was not burned. Not just him, the people around them also saw this. They were stunned, probably thinking it was magic. She repeated that it was a robe a celestial maiden once wore. Then she whispered the real name into the shopkeeper's ear, and he declared it the Fire Rat Cloak. A lot of people got interested in it, and she won her bet, walking away with Chow Yu wearing a lot of free clothes. He asked why the robe didn't catch fire, and she questioned him in return, asking what he thinks clothes are made from. He suggests cotton, linen, grass fibers, and maybe sometimes bugs. Then she tells him the robe they saw was made of rocks. His jaw dropped so fast she almost laughed. She explains that even stone can take on many different forms, like rocks with a fibrous texture. Though uncommon, this technique has been known since ancient days. Cloths woven from that substance are referred to as the cloak of the fire rat's skin in some eastern island nations. Most people have never heard of it before, and those who have never actually seen it. That's how she sold it for 10 times the price. And about the story, it was half true and half made up, though the embroidery on the sleeves seemed familiar to her. They were like those twisted versions of the Western letters her father used in his notes. As for the woman they called a celestial maiden, she was probably from the West, though it's hard to tell whether she was truly lost or taken away. The woman crafted and embroidered the robe so she could send a secret message to her homeland asking for help. And on her wedding day, she most likely wore inners that she had soaked with water. Just like how a wooden container with water won't burn until the water dries, her inners would have worked the same way. Even strong flames wouldn't immediately burn your body. All it would take is plunging into the spring before the flames could reach you. Chow Yu was surprised, but it made sense to him, although he asked why she didn't tell that to the shopkeeper. She simply replied that she didn't want to spoil the romance. He laughed as if to admit that she was right. However, she didn't tell him one thing, and it is very interesting and suspicious. How does a perfectly ordinary young woman have the nerve to set fire to herself and run around? Maomao thought she certainly wouldn't. What's more, the young lady could read and knew how to make stone fiber. It seemed unlikely that some random performer would have such skills. Maybe she was a spy or something. After all, Maomao knew the West was a region where minor conflicts with other countries were common. She also thinks about how the country of Li has been acting suspiciously lately as well, especially the two envoys who used the magic trick and were somehow connected to the Shi clan uprising. Still, she, for her part, left these pointless fantasies and continued on her way home. Now, I know there wasn't much of Jinshi and Maomao here, but let's keep in mind that the series mainly focuses on the mystery genre, and there won't be many of their scenes even in the later chapters. But I still hope you continue to watch. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to me. Take care of yourself and goodbye.
If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay, maybe you could be the change.